Welcome back to the Britt Mayer Show, where we talk about the stories that matter most to you in the realms of culture, politics, faith, and health. And today I am so excited about what we're going to talk about. We are going to break down the big shakeup that is happening in the CDC under Secretary Kennedy. And we're going to dive into the critical question: is it ethical to keep pushing the mRNA COVID vaccine, given what we know about their risks and efficacy? And we're even going to tackle California's insane childhood vaccine mandate for school entry and what we could see there under this new era that is shaking up the old big government health. I am thrilled to be joined by Dr. Mollie James. She's a senior fellow at the Independent Medical Alliance and founder of the James Clinic, and she's going to bring her expertise in critical care and integrative medicine to this vital discussion on medical freedom and patient-centered care. So don't miss this eye-opening conversation. Grab a coffee, subscribe to the Britt Mayer Show wherever you are watching or listening, and please share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. This is such a great conversation, and I am thrilled that you are here. Let's get started. But first, a word about the sponsor of this episode. This episode is brought to you in part by We Heart Nutrition. We Heart Nutrition is a phenomenal line of supplements. I have tried so many products on the market that have always delivered half the results I'm looking for or insignificant results. So I am extremely picky about the supplements that I consistently use and that I would ever recommend to you. I have been using We Heart Nutrition now for long enough to be able to confidently tell you that I have seen the results that are promised. I am so thankful for the fact that they are clean, that they are third-party tested, and not only that, but the company that stands behind their products is very public about being pro-life, pro-family, very pro-conservative values. So I feel good while taking their products. And I also feel really good about supporting a company that is aligned with my values and doesn't fight against my values. So I would encourage you to check out weheartnutrition.com if you are looking for top shelf supplements that is backed by a company that aligns with your values. Check out weheartnutrition.com. I actually started following you back in the COVID era because you were just a champion for medical freedom in the height of all the insanity. And my family actually, we relied on your information a lot for just getting through all of the crazy. So this is like a dream come true to actually have you here all these crazy years later.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm happy to be here. And, I was new to Twitter when all that took off. So it's kind of surreal at this point in time.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, you made a huge dent because people really started coming to you for the advice that you were putting out as a doctor that was really speaking against the narrative. And here you are still in a different capacity, really being the voice of freedom and intelligence and dissent. And so I just appreciate all the work that you have done. So thank you. Let's just jump into talking about everything going on at the CDC right now because there is a lot. So why don't you just walk us through kind of overall what is happening for people who are like, wait, CDC, what's going on? What's happening with the CDC right now?
Yes. So they had just approved or Senate confirmed their CDC director. She got fired yesterday, according to everyone but her, which is kind of interesting. Her lawyer came out and said, we weren't fired. We didn't resign. So that's kind of an interesting thing that will play out. That is good news for us. To me, the headline, though, is that the EUA, the emergency use authorization, was revoked for the COVID-19 vaccines. So we applaud that decision strongly. It took way too long for us to get to that point.
Yes.
But thankfully, some semblance of common sense has hit DC, and we want to keep building on those successes. It needs to go much further.
So let's go into that a little bit because I was talking with my husband right before this interview and he was like, wait, what? The emergency use authorization was still active? I'm like, yes. 5 years later, we were still active, which I don't think a lot of people realize, because COVID is a relic of the past for a lot of us. And so to know that there was still an emergency use authorization in place, was that specific for the mRNA vaccines?
I believe so. And to me, it's in my rearview mirror somewhat too, because I feel like people have either they've decided what camp they're in. They're either going to roll up their sleeves and get every single booster that is recommended, or they're not doing it at all. And so
Yep.
a lot of people have lost track of this. So the EUA was the emergency use authorization. That was the original vaccine and some of those original boosters. And I actually don't even know if I'm assuming something got approved in the meantime, but they put the EUA vaccine on the childhood schedule. So we didn't even have an approved vaccine that went on the schedule. So that's a little bit problematic to me.
What's the difference between, let's just give it in a nutshell, what's the difference between an emergency use authorization, vaccine, or injection versus one that has gone through everything and it's formally on the schedule? What's the difference between those?
Yeah. So the EUA was really given because we're in an emergency. We have no better options and alternatives, which we did, and we'll come back to that probably. And this is the only or best alternative that we have. So we're going to skip some of those safety data. We're just going to put it out there because the need is so critical that it exceeds the need to get safety data. So that's the way it was sold to us during COVID, during 2020 and 2021. They said, you can get back to life again if you just get this. And so it was really sold to people as the magic bullet. We know that it wasn't. So and that doesn't carry immunity, right? Because everybody knows it's experimental. You have a choice to take it. It's just an option. If you're in a pinch, in an emergency, you have an option that is given versus the standard, which goes through all the safety testing, all of the due diligence to approve something, to approve a product in which it carries the liability, product liability. So when you have an approved product on the market, before it gets on the childhood schedule, by the way, then the manufacturers are supposed to have liability for that product. So really in COVID, what they really played in the gray zone, right? Because they confused the situation. So nobody really knows what at the end of the day, is it approved? Is it not approved? In the military where they said you have to take this, but we have Comirnaty that's approved, but you're going to get the other one, and really muddied the waters. So they did this across the board in COVID to confuse everybody. So that's where we are now, is this EUA has been rescinded, praise be, and we can move forward now and solve the rest of the problems from this nightmare.
So yesterday, we're recording this on, is the 29th? It's the 28th. I cannot believe we are already creeping into September. What is happening? But this interview will post right after you and I have this conversation, which is great because it will all be very relevant with what's happening. So yesterday on August 27th, HHS Secretary Kennedy posted on X. He said, "I promised 4 things. 1, to end COVID vaccine mandates. 2, to keep vaccines available to people who want them, especially the vulnerable. 3, to demand placebo-controlled trials from companies. And 4, to end the emergencies." The emergency period. In a series of FDA actions today, we accomplished all 4 goals. The emergency use authorizations for COVID vaccines, once used to justify broad mandates on the general public during the Biden administration, are now rescinded. The FDA has now issued marketing authorization for those at higher risk. And he goes on to talk about Moderna, 6+ months, Pfizer, 5+, Novavax, 12+. These vaccines are available for all patients who choose them after consulting with their doctors. The American people demanded science, safety, and common sense, and this framework delivers all 3. You guys put out a press release, I think it was following that announcement, which said, "We understand the mRNA mandates have been a healthcare disaster, the full implications of which we are now just beginning to experience." This is Dr. Joseph Varon. Is that how you pronounce his last name?
Joseph Varon.
Varone. Okay. I am a president and chief medical officer who you work with. This experimental shot was forced upon workers, parents, and school children with the threat of destroying their lives if they didn't comply. But in reality, it's the shot itself that has destroyed lives. Today's actions by the FDA are a much needed return to sanity and the beginning of a reckoning for those who pushed these disastrous anti-freedom mandates. So give us the summary of those, what Secretary Kennedy put out. Do you think that goes far enough? And then I'll ask you what happens now that EUA has been rescinded.
I don't think it goes far enough. And I've said this from the beginning. If you're at low risk for COVID, you don't need a COVID shot because your immune system is strong. And if you're at high risk for COVID shot, because it works through the spike protein, you shouldn't have one if you're high risk either. So I think parsing that data and trying to say, well, if you're high risk, you can still have access to it. That's really just to appease the naysayers out there because the data is not going to support that as we roll out. And it hasn't. We know that the more shots you get, the more COVID you get, the more side effects you get, and so on and so forth. So They also muddied the waters when they recommended, if you remember a month or two ago, they said, well, we're not recommending it for children and pregnant women.
Right.
And we all applauded and said,
Yep.
that's great. They never should have had an EUA for children. There was never an emergency in children to authorize that. And pregnant women, we have been, very outspoken. It increased the miscarriage rate from 4% to 12% at one point and when they came out, and now it's dropped back to baseline. But then when you look at the guidelines, they were still in the guidelines, and they're
Right.
still saying now high risk above 6 months. There's no 6-month-old that needs a COVID shot. So we have work to do to proceed with that. Now, as far as the mandates go, here's the problem with that is you still have healthcare students who are denied rotations if they don't have it. You still have employers asking if you have a COVID shot. We're still writing vaccine exemptions for people for COVID shots. Yes.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
I mean, we really need to catch up, and we need the public to understand that. I mean, people were denied chemotherapy because they didn't get a COVID shot. They were denied transplants because they didn't get that. So we have a lot of work to do to really educate the medical industrial complex about the real impact of these.
What happens now that this emergency has been ended, as Secretary Kennedy said yesterday that it has been? What does that mean in practical terms for people listening with what they're going to see available on the market?
Yeah, I don't know, because pulling that shot back again, everyone's kind of decided, am I going to get the latest booster or not? And it's down to, 15 to 20% for the general population. You're looking at less than 30% of healthcare employees are getting boosters. So I think everyone's made that decision already. So to me, the next real decision point is pulling this off the market and not making it available to anyone. So I don't like where we are right now. I don't think it goes far enough. But as far as impacting you and I every day, we've already decided what we're doing.
We decided a while ago. Let's talk about what you just said about getting this thing once and for all off the market. Sell me if I'm a naysayer who thinks, no, this was the best thing that's ever happened since the smallpox vaccine. This thing needs to be readily available. Don't even talk about pulling it off the market. How would you convince me that it is not ethical to continue to have the mRNA vaccine in any form on the market?
So first of all, if you look at the baseline assumptions when the shots were offered, they said it only stays in your arm. It doesn't leave the muscle. It's there for just a few days to make antibodies, and then it goes away. We have mountains of data that already show that's not true. We have people who 3 years later, they're still making spike antibody and it's still creating problems. So just on the baseline assumptions it was sold on that have proven not to be true, do you not have more questions about that? And then when we look at the data again, the more COVID shots you have, the more COVID you get. So this is where I debate people who say, well, you need your boosters. Well, if the spike protein is a problem because getting COVID and the shots help you get more COVID, even if you're in this downward spiral, they can't win that argument. They can't win. So, these are just important things we need to keep in mind as we move forward.
I was seeing too that worldwide with the mRNA vaccine, that even though the market is tanking for the COVID mRNA vaccine, I was looking that in 2024 it was at 9 billion, and by 2035 the prediction is 2 billion. So there's definitely a shrink happening. Sorry for all those investors, but it is the mRNA technology is expanding now beyond COVID to trials for flu, RSV, HIV, malaria, cancer, norovirus, Lyme. It says that there are over 300 trials now in the pipeline using this mRNA technology. So what are your thoughts on that? I'm curious. That makes me very curious.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because again, for those of us who've decided, right, it's kind of a moot issue, but it's actually very relevant because they're going to keep pulling these things out and sending them, to market. And we need to be aware of what that is. So the lipid nanoparticle that the mRNA is developed in has been shown. A lot of the doctors in IMA, Independent Medical Alliance, have talked about this, that lipid nanoparticle is actually part of the problem because it's super inflammatory. And we know that any health issue is worse with inflammation.
Right.
We want to avoid inflammation across the board. So injecting something in your body that creates an inflammatory process is not going to be a good thing. So this whole platform is not ready for prime time. We need to slow their roll on that, pull back on those, especially with our food supply.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of us are pretty aware that our food supply is tainted, and we don't need one more level or one more way that it's compromised at this point.
Should people be concerned about mRNA sneaking into our meat and going into our food? Is that a legitimate concern, or is that just a crazy story that's being told across social media?
It is a legitimate concern, and we need to listen to those farmers who are raising alarm bells that they can't take their animals to auction if they don't have certain criteria. So I'm not an expert in that area, but I do know it's a legitimate concern, and there are certain industries where it's more of a problem than others, but it is something we need to be aware of.
All of this just makes my head spin that we're even still in this state all these years later. Let's talk specifically about some of those ethical concerns about the mRNA vaccines, because yes, you and I have made up our minds, but there are still people who, I think they would say that they've made up their minds, but I'm still pressing forward with information because I still think that there are people who can be convinced, and you might not agree with me, to the audience listening. My uncle out there is never going to hear anything but just keep getting boosted. But I think that it's important just to remind people that, like you said, the inflammation is a genuine concern, especially if you have any underlying health issue. One of the things that was claimed a lot during COVID and even now is that these mRNA technologies create this biochemical havoc with genetic disruption. Mm-hmm. I want you to set the record straight on what does mRNA technology do to our genes, down to, I'm not you, I don't have all the medical background, but the genomes inside of us, the important computer pieces of who we are. Does mRNA mess with that?
I can't speak to that, but I am going to say we know that genetically modified foods incorporate into our DNA. So even the food we eat, not even an injection. So there are people out there who've raised this concern that this is genetic material, and even more so the mRNA part as the DNA, the contamination with the SB40 DNA components that contaminated the shots may be a problem there as well. So people way smarter than me in this area have raised that concern. I'm just used to be a surgeon, so that's not my area of specialty, but it's something to be concerned about, because this is not only going to impact you, it's going to impact your children and for generations, these genetic alterations. So if there's a possibility of concern, it needs to be explored. And again, when you go back and you look at how these shots were approved, they were approved as a vaccine, not as a genetic therapy. Mm-hmm. And so they skipped that part of the testing in completely. So again, we need to rewind. We need to go back and cross-check all those criteria to make sure we're not hurting anybody.
Yeah. What happens at this point with childhood vaccine schedule, with the COVID vaccine, and with schools across America who are still pushing this? I don't know how many schools there are still. I know that there were quite a few colleges out here in California that were requiring the COVID shot for students. But what happens now with the emergency use authorization being pulled? Mm-hmm. What happens?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see. I think if you assign liability to the people who are requiring it, I bet they disappear overnight.
So they will no longer have a liability shield.
They should not. And they shouldn't have one now, because they shouldn't be providing medical recommendations to people when they're not physicians, right? A college shouldn't be providing medical recommendations and requirements to their students. But if you assign them liability and they have to pay when somebody's injured, they're going to disappear completely. And I'm glad you brought this up, because you have organizations and you have states that, when we said the CDC requirements are not good back in 21 and 22, we got canceled. Now they're saying the same thing. They're saying, the new CDC, the FDA, they're shaking things up and they're not following science. So we're going to put out our own guidelines. Mm-hmm. And I just want to know, how is that any different?
So, that, we have seen a huge shakeup with the CDC and the FDA, even as recent as yesterday was crazy. So when this posts on Friday, it'll be just a couple days past this, and who knows what the story is going to be on Friday. But as of now, on Thursday, on August 28th, stuff went down yesterday. So Susan Menarez was confirmed as the CDC director in July 2025. Now, that was a whole process because she had to be named by Trump. There was someone else that was actually named before her. And then last minute, Trump pulled him. And it was kind of unexpected,
Weldon?
correct?
David Weldon, I believe is the name.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yes. Yep. So he
He is.
got pulled, and then Susan Menarez was just there. She just manifested. And there was a lot of concern within the conservative community over her appointment, but she had to go through a whole process and was confirmed by the Senate in July. And then here's where things get a little wild. Apparently, she was fired by the White House on August 27th after refusing to resign. But her lawyers state that she resisted unscientific, reckless directives from Secretary Kennedy, particularly on vaccine policy. And she refused to fire dedicated health experts that apparently Kennedy wanted gone. Now, this conflict stemmed from her commitment to scientific evidence and vaccines, according to her, which clashed with Kennedy's push to limit the mRNA vaccine access. But then, as of this morning, when you and I are recording, I'm doing the research, thinking everything, is still kosher. Nope. Now she claims she still holds the role. And
Yes.
now there's a legal standoff. What in the world, break this down. What is happening in the world of the CDC and why should we care?
So this is where we really have to trust and stand behind RFK Jr. I know a lot of us have been critical of him. We want to see progress and we want to see it faster, but we have to remember that these organizations are filled with opponents. They're filled with deep state actors who are pushing people to the top to get what they want on their agenda. We know that she was in favor of things like AI, which most of us conservatives do not want more AI in our healthcare. We want less. We want more humanity and human touch. So they're dealing with, this is such a distraction from what we're trying to get accomplished. You serve at the pleasure of the president. And if you are terminated, goodbye.
Right.
I don't know why this is even a question. So it just goes to show you how committed these people are to being disruptors in a negative way and not putting the health of our nation first.
Well, after her resignation, firing, beginning of the legal standoff, all of that, on the same day, we had at least 4 senior CDC officials resigning, and they all cited weaponization of public health. No, not during COVID. That wasn't weaponization of public health. No. Now is weaponization of public health. So we had the chief medical officer of the CDC. We had, they're all head honchos of the CDC, all resigning. They all posted petty rants about how horrible it is and we're all going to die. This is horrible. And they all pulled out. So what can we expect with all of this breaking? Because it truly is breaking. There's a huge shakeup happening right now in the CDC. So what can we expect with all of this?
I hope more of them leave. I hope more of them follow their moral compass out, because I think nothing would be better for the health of this country. If you look at those people, they have pronouns in their bios. They're going to die on the hill of something that has injured and hurt millions of people in this country. They do not follow common sense. They do not have a nuanced approach to this. And so good riddance. I hope more of them leave. I hope we burn these institutions to the ground and start over and build it on true science and data and common sense instead of big pharma and their profits.
Amen. I do too. Do you think that that's going to happen? Do you think that this is going to go deeper, that there will truly be that purge? What is your, what's your prophecy on all of it?
I don't know, because what I saw in medicine in the ICU is people were willing to follow their principles until it affected their pocketbook. So I think it'll be interesting to see where that break point is. There's a number of people who can go out and get another job as a consultant for big pharma, whatever, but there's going to be people who can't afford to take that risk. And so hopefully the divide is deep enough that we get rid of a lot of the bad actors, and the ones that have to remain get dissolved out or diluted out with the people who truly do have our best interest in mind. If you talk to people like Sabine Hazen, there are good people at the FDA that want good science out there. It's the leadership that's leading them in the wrong direction or stifling progress. So we want to keep the good people in those organizations as it exists. And COVID fundamentally cracked medicine. It cracked it between the people who follow everything the government tells you and serves up whatever talking points they give you versus the critical thinkers who are outside the box, who are thinking of ways to create a better situation. That will never go back the way it was. And hopefully these institutions will follow.
That's interesting that you say that, because COVID did crack a lot. It cracked a lot of churches. It cracked a lot of families, which is sad. Even just friendships. It was like this massive earthquake. And that's why I think it's important to continue to talk about it, not stay fixated on what it was, but to just remember what it was and what we learned. Because man, the tyranny that we experienced, the medical tyranny from the top, FDA, CDC, the public health officers that aren't even voted on, locally, that would tell you. Out here in California, my kids were so little. It's so sad. But I remember that you couldn't even go to a beach and throw a ball. And when we asked why, Wilma Wooten, our public health officer down here in San Diego, she said, because it just makes sense. And then so you could be arrested. If you were just throwing a ball with your kids, you had to keep moving on the beach. You couldn't stand still. But it's important for people to remember that those head guys who inflicted all of that tyrannical insanity on us are still in their positions.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think it's important to talk about what is happening right now in the CDC and the FDA. And so many people voted for Trump because we held to a promise that Kennedy might just be our hope to shake things up. And like you said, burn the whole thing down.
Yeah. And I hope they are. And this is where the people listening need to start locally. Yes, Trump is in office and RFK is doing the hard work at his level, and he's going to have limitations on what he can do. Where you as individuals and we as individuals can make the most impact is learn who your county health supervisor is. Learn who those people are in your own neighborhoods, in your communities, in your counties, in your states, because that's where you can really impact things and pull the lever. And medicine should go back to the states. The states regulate their own medicine. They have their own medical boards. They have their own laws. And so if you really care what happened, look locally first, and maybe take the guidance of federal, but look locally.
It's good. It is important to look locally. I saw a data point that in I think it was a couple months ago, there was a big national poll that showed that only 32% of adults still view the mRNA vaccines as generally safe, with 52% now being unsure. And that just leads into the trust in healthcare institutions totally in free fall, plummeting. Only 39% of Republicans, and I think that's high, trusted the CDC in 2025 per Gallup. So how, just to shift into what you guys are doing with IMA and how you are really working to redefine health and trust in real science, why don't you share a little bit about what you guys are doing?
Yep. So the Independent Medical Alliance is a group of doctors who really put it all on the line during COVID. We jeopardized our careers and our financial security to speak out because what we saw happening was so wrong. We saw people dying that didn't need to be. So now we've come together to really provide that common sense guidance to individuals, to organizations, to things like the HHS. When they have a problem, they need a team of experts that can step in and help them find the best data available and make the best choices. And you see that with the bird flu. Our team of doctors was able to provide information and change the trajectory of how that was managed.
Gosh, I mean, even that, I'm like, oh yeah, the bird flu. That was just recently.
Yes. So they have come up with the Smart Moms campaign so that moms out there, moms just want the best for their kids. And all this back and forth creates mass confusion for individuals who want to do the best thing. So they created the Smart Moms campaign so that moms out there could send in questions and we could develop a database that they could come back and trust with non-biased information, just guidance, best information available. They've done the same thing now with the Patient Bill of Rights. What are your rights if you go to a hospital? Most people I know are terrified. They're absolutely terrified to step foot in a hospital because even if the care they get is good, the customer service is horrible and the patient is the last consideration. So, people out there are going to have to find a beacon of hope and truth like the IMA. IMAhealth.org is the website if you want to go check it out and understand what we're about. You're going to need more of those free thinkers out there to support the government in making policies. So that's what they're there to do.
Yeah, we need more of that. We needed a lot more of that just a few years ago. So that's why I'm so thankful that you guys are doing what you're doing now. And that is really cool about, what is it called? The mom portal that you mentioned?
It's called Smart Moms Ask. So it was a campaign around, because again, at the beginning of the school year, you've got questions, you've got that push on those wellness, those back to school physicals, the push to get vaccinated. Within my own clinic, one of my own team members had their child fired from the practice because they didn't opt to get the vaccines. And it said, you didn't follow our,
Yeah.
corporate vaccine
Yep.
policy.
It's a huge
Well,
thing out here in California. Huge.
there is no policy that a mom needs to follow when she's taking the best care of her children. It's her instinct and her common sense and research. So, and that's what IMA really advocates for, is informed consent. You know what's happening. You have all the pluses and the minuses, and you can make a decision on your own. And we support that decision, whether it's in alignment with what we recommend or not, because everyone should have the freedom to dictate their own healthcare.
So, talking through moms and back to school, I have seen in the last 48 hours, which I don't know, maybe it correlates to everything going on with the CDC and the FDA, and that media, big media, is in the pocket of big pharma. But I have seen so many breaking news stories about Omicron variant on the rise in classrooms. Prepare now, because it's coming, mamas. It's coming for your babies. You're dropping them off at school, and that COVID variant is lurking. It is in the backpacks. What would you say to moms who are seeing that and they are, they're genuinely concerned, or their kid just got sick with whatever horrible virus is going around right now? My kids got sick with it. I don't know. Maybe it was a variant. I don't know. What would you say if they come to you, like we're talking right now, over a cup of coffee? They're like, Mollie, Dr. Mollie, what do I do? I'm scared. And what do I do if my kid gets sick?
Yeah. So back to school is really one of the sick times of year, right? Back to school and then the holidays is when everybody's mixing it up with new people. They're getting exposed to new things. And it's just the sniffles for about 2 weeks back to school, and then it calms down. So we actually prepare our patients for that. We say, hey, maybe you want to do the nasal spray so that if they do get exposed, they don't get quite as sick. Now's a good time to start your vitamin D again. Maybe you want to have some ivermectin on hand. Maybe you want to have some silver, Argentine 23 silver on hand that you can spray in your nose, spray in your eyes, take orally. So just look at ways to support your immune system as opposed to living in fear for something. Because if you're afraid, it actually inhibits your immune system by like 50%. So we don't want to ever live in fear. We just want to live in knowledge replaces fear. So nothing to be afraid of right now.
What if you do happen to catch what you think could be COVID? Obviously, in years past, the push was the vaccines, the masking, all of that. Who knows if they're going to try? I have no idea. I don't know if they're going to try to run it again. It might be a little repetitive. Yeah.
I've seen this back, so maybe.
Me too. My only thought is, at least out here in California, we've got a governor soft campaigning now for president. So I don't know if he would be that idiotic to try to run it a second time, but maybe he does. But what would your, as a doctor, what would your, if you were to give informed consent to people listening, what would your suggestion be if they think that they've been exposed or it is going around a lot? What kind of medical treatments are available now?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same as it was before, except now it's less severe. So now it's probably a cold, and it might be a bad cold for you. So I think of everything as a pyramid. You need your foundational pieces, and then you work your way up as you get sicker or less patient to deal with it. How's that? So your lifestyle, you should be eating good food. You should be making sure your gut is good. You should be making sure your blood sugars aren't flying off the handle, right? So set yourself up to be healthy. Make sure your vitamin D levels are optimized. Have a sick box on hand. So I'm still a big advocate of ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, a Z-Pak or doxycycline. We boost vitamin D. So I'll give people 50,000 IU vitamin D for about 10 days if they're sick. Vitamin C, a gram an hour. And if you can't tolerate that, come in and get a vitamin C infusion. So we can work our way up the algorithm as far as you have a lot of options to treat any infection.
What do you think about doing any of those things you just mentioned, like C, D, because the sunshine's going to kind of go away. So C, D, even silver, like you mentioned, as a preventative going into what has always been like the cold, sick season.
Yeah, I'm all for that. So we optimize all of our patients' vitamin D levels all year round, 60 to 90 for healthy people. 80 to 120 is what I put my cancer patients, try to drive them even a little bit higher.
Wow.
So, yeah, make sure you have an adequate level of that. Your nutrients. So many people are nutrient depleted when they come to us as a new patient. So, get your multivitamin, get your magnesium, get your B complex in so that your body has the machinery to do what it does best.
That's so good. Especially, yeah, as a mom, I just think of keeping the kids healthy because we do not have time for to go
Nobody
through. I'm like, oh, we're going into it. I can just feel it. The weather is starting to change. I'm like, oh, here we go. It's like gray outside right now, and it's been so sunshiny and pretty. Okay, I do have to ask you this before we wrap up because I'm loving talking with you. I feel like I should have had a cup of coffee because I just feel like I'm talking with a friend. Okay, I have to ask you about crazy California because anytime I interview a health expert, I get reamed for why didn't you ask about the vaccine laws in California? So because you swim in informed consent, I just want to paint the picture of what we are living in California over the last few years and then get your take on what we may see and if you guys are pushing for anything with IMA. So in 2015, effective 2016 in California, there was a Senate Bill 277, which eliminated, and I actually, all of this is very personal to me because this was when my oldest was like baby when all of this was happening. So in 2015, implemented in 2016, Senate Bill 277 was signed into law, and it eliminated personal belief and religious exemptions for mandatory school vaccinations in California. So it required kids to be vaccinated to attend school unless, here's the other little thing, and it was the little carrot that we were given, unless they qualified for a medical exemption. So this, they said, was enacted because of a measles outbreak and that there were all these opt-outs happening. So this gets implemented in 2015. 2019 rolls along and Senate Bill 276 was signed into law. This was in September. And there was a companion bill, Senate Bill 714, that tightened oversight on medical exemptions. Okay, so that little carrot just went away for school vaccinations by requiring them to be submitted through a state database and reviewed by the California Department of Public Health to, quote, prevent fraudulent or invalid exemptions. And there was an appeal process if your exemption was revoked. They grandfathered in some, but there were all these checkpoints too. And then if your doctor who wrote the exemption died, your exemption was null and void.
Oh, gosh.
Crazy. Okay. And this applied and still applies because it's still all in place. This applies to private schools, public schools, charter schools that meet on campus, and daycares. And they're checkpoints. So even if you're like, well, we got all of the vaccines through kindergarten, well, as soon as you meet the next checkpoint, if you're not fully up to date, your kid's out. So that's what we're living in California. Now, when 276 passed, it was a huge, huge deal in California. And I remember at the time, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. saying with Del Bigtree that this would go up to the Supreme Court and be overturned. Well, COVID hit very shortly after. And we know everything got a lot of bit crazy and everyone got a lot distracted. So I'm going back to that now, looking at it and just wondering what your thoughts are on all of that. And if us out here suffering under all of this in crazy California could hope to see anything federally with all of this.
Yeah, so let's get back to what IMA promotes. IMA promotes that a doctor-patient relationship is sacred and no government should be in between that. So for a state government to say, we'll look at what your doctor told you and we'll decide if it's valid or not, that is an erroneous thought right there. That is completely unethical and that has no business. That should have never passed in the first place. So we want to restore that doctor-patient relationship. And if I talk to you as my patient and I say, you shouldn't get this, that's the end. There's no further discussion on that. And that's the way it should be in California. So we need to do everything we can to overturn that. We've seen the federal government, and I don't know if I'm optimistic about this, but they do have the levers because they can take funding away from these schools who continue to use this, right? We
Mm-hmm.
saw this in the transgender sports. If you
Right.
continue to not acknowledge this, we're going to take away your funding. So I'm sure there's some kind of lever or mechanism that somebody in that policy department understands that we can leverage them to make better choices
Mm-hmm.
in the state of California. So that needs to go away carte blanche. There's still 5 or 6 states, like I said, they're making their own vaccine rules, requirements, schedules. We've seen the American Association of Pediatrics doing the same thing. All of that needs to go away. And they need to have explicit liability for going against the guidelines if that's the game we're going to play.
Yeah, I agree. There are a few things that I use the word hate for. I hate what they did out here in California, playing games with our kids' health, and just the insanity of requiring all of that, especially if your child was vaccine injured. They still require you to, any siblings still have to go through everything. That's not considered a valid exemption case. And then your child who was vaccine injured by a specific vaccine still has to go through everything else. And then to try to find a doctor who will write an exemption is nearly impossible now, because there's a threshold now that if you've written so many, the state starts to come after you. I mean, it's crazy demonic out here with all of that. I hate it so much.
So, and at the end of the day, as a physician, I would never make a carte blanche decision that everybody has to do this, because people are going to have problems and complications. So I think if we restore liability to those individuals making those choices, they're going to open it up a lot. You're going to see that change. Yeah, they hide behind the shield of they're a government employee, right? So they have some protection to make these mandatory statements for people regarding their health. And if I always do this, if you take vaccines and you replace it with something from my world, like a surgery, you have to have your gallbladder out or you can't come to school. That sounds stupid.
It's crazy.
But it's still a medical intervention.
Right.
That's how far off the rails we are, that they just continue to drip on us and think we're going to accept it as normal because we've been told for so many years vaccines save lives, and nobody's ever been able to substantiate it or even been asked to.
It's so important. I am just holding out hope that something federally happens for all these kids who have been put into these horribly unsafe situations because parents feel like they have to send their kid to school. And so they have to catch up on all it's so sad.
It disadvantages people in lower socioeconomic status because they can't leave the state. They can't move. They can't hire a private teacher. They can't do things that may lift them out of those requirements. So it's kind of the same thing as when we did COVID shots and we said, hey, we'll give you $100 if you bring your kid in to get a shot.
Or burgers and a French fry. Remember that?
Or a Krispy Kreme donut or a lap dance. I mean, that
what did we live through? I just can't. It seems so fake. I can't believe we lived through that.
Bad.
Okay, so kind of wrapping up on all of this, I want you to share a little bit more about IMA for mamas who are interested in what you guys are doing, and how they could follow you, and if they have questions or are local to you, how they could find you. And then we'll wrap it up with talking about things that you expect to see in the near future.
Yeah. So IMA, you're going to follow at Honest Medicine on Twitter. They also have an Instagram page, so that's probably where you're going to go to find that group. I am at Dr. Mollie James or at James_clinic. That's the clinic I built that's my phoenix out of the ashes of my career from COVID. So we started out, we treated about 4,000 COVID patients, and now we've pivoted into just general concierge integrative medicine. So lots of places you can go to follow. IMAhealth.org is going to be your database. They are pouring out resources all of the time from each of the senior fellows from different perspectives. So you've got the naturopath, you've got the holistic team, you've got the traditional team, you've got the pulmonary, the infectious disease, the family medicine. So we all pool together and we discuss and debate and give you the best information that we can. So that's a great source for you to check, and unbiased information.
I just think it's so awesome that you guys are offering that for the public. And then are you in close conversation with our HHS secretary? Do you guys have roundtables with him?
So I believe there's some kind of communication. I don't know exactly. I'm not party to those. I'm running my clinic, but I believe they're pretty close ties between the people in our organization and the people that are making policy decisions. So I would say we do have the ear. I don't know how far that goes, but I have seen some of the things slide through that are positive, and we are all supportive of the changes RFK Jr. and his team are making.
Well, even you guys really did push to have the emergency use authorization terminated and for these mRNA vaccines to be taken off market. So we're halfway there. We're getting there, which is really encouraging. So I'm so thankful for the work that you are doing. What can our listeners be watching for? What do you think is coming down that we should have our eye on?
Yeah, there's so many things that the veil is being pulled back on. You know, COVID is the canary in the coal mine for me. And for some people, like moms of vaccine injured, they knew about this long before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of a building a generational thing. Now you have the statins, and we're hearing about the corruption behind statins. The latest is hormones. They've said, oh, but oops, we really got it wrong for 30 years, and hormones are actually good for you. And sorry about that, but I think you're going to continue to see a trend of pulling back the veil to what's really true for your best health. Just stay plugged in and engaged so you at least know what topics are coming to the surface, because they're going to impact your personal health at some point in time. One way or another, right? Through vaccinations or menopause treatment, or, you know, how to manage your cholesterol if you get cancer. So I only hope that this accelerates the change to a more effective, more trusting healthcare system, because COVID broke it in a way nothing could and accelerated some of those changes, as painful as it's been.
Yeah. One last question for you. I think it's next month that Secretary Kennedy has promised to have a big, big press conference on the autism research that he and the team have been conducting. What do you expect that we're going to hear? Do you have any thoughts?
I don't, but again, if you're looking at a health emergency in our society, you know, the skyrocketing rates of autism is something that warrants immediate attention. And this was really brought to my attention through people who were looking at military preparedness. They're like, if 1 in 33 of your people has autism spectrum and doesn't qualify, if half of them are overweight and doesn't qualify, this is, you know, this has second and third order effects in all of these different areas. So, you know, there are people who are autism advocates who really took that and said, our kids are great, you know, we wouldn't have changed anything, and they're taking it personally. But I think this is definitely an area we need to focus on as a public health emergency and find out why we're having this and how can we better serve children who are diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder, and how can we lower that and start to turn that around so that it's not so prominent.
Which ties into everything we're seeing right now with the FDA and CDC, the shakeup. I feel more confident knowing that there's the biblical analogy of the new wine in old wine skins. And I think that there's something to that where I'm encouraged by seeing the old wine tossed out. You know, it's like, let's just get it out so we can get some new wine in, and then really pull the veil back and see, you know, what is causing autism? Is it the vaccines? That is okay to ask that question. Is it because we are doing so many vaccines and we've never studied so many? I mean, it exploded after the liability shield was placed on in the 80s. You know, we've never looked at what does that do for someone now who is 25 and is just getting blown up with all of these shots, and then whatever they're putting in the skies and what we're eating and all. I mean, there's so much, the birth control that girls are put on when they're 8 years old. You know, I mean, it's just a lot that we are doing. And then we're like, I don't know why our kids have autism. I don't know, but we shouldn't ask questions. It's like, no, let's get all those people out who are blocking that very, very important discourse. So if that's what's happening with the FDA and CDC and preparing for a lot of veils to be, you know, torn down, then I'm happy.
Yeah, same. I've never seen health professionals be so defensive when you're asking a major question about a public health emergency. I don't know what it is, but it's not vaccines. Like, why are you so defensive of that? We just all want answers. We want what's best for public health. So it's an odd hill for them to die on.
It really is. But that's why I'm thankful that you guys are there and that you're at least somewhat in the ear and somewhat at the table. Dr. Mollie, I just adore you. I am so glad that we finally got to have this sit down, because I feel like I've followed you for years and you truly did make such an impact on my family during COVID. So I'm so thankful for you. And I'm sure we'll have you back on to discuss whatever happens, in the coming months and in September and all of the things that we're waiting to see. So if you felt this conversation was valuable and encouraged you, made you think, please share it. Please subscribe wherever you're listening. We put out great conversations like this regularly. And Dr. Mollie, why don't you tell everyone once again how they can follow you?
Yep, you're going to go to Honest Medicine to follow the IMA, and I'm at Dr. Mollie James or at Molls James on Instagram and Twitter. So
thank you so much.
Thank you.